I stood outside in the cold, windy, freezing rain to check this out, to see this movie a few days earlier. And you know what? It was totally worth it. Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome to an all-new Talkin Movies. As always, I am your host, the real Geno Reynolds, and today we're going to be talking about the sequel to the surprise hit Happy Death Day, which is titled Happy Death Day to You. I will do my best to not spoil things about this movie, but I do have to talk about certain plot points. So there might be some minor spoilerish things here throughout the review. What this movie's about, it takes place a little bit after the first movie, and things are normal until Ryan, who's the roommate of the main character of the first movie's boyfriend, Ryan starts to have the loop happen to him. He ends up dying and then wakes up in his car where he woke up the first time. The same things start happening, similar to the events of the first movie. Anyway, he approaches his roommate and Tree says, "I've had experience with this." So they figure out why the loop is happening, and they need to stop it, but then there are some other complications that happen that end up making Tree end up living the same day, her birthday, over again as in the first movie, but this time things are just a little different. I don't again want to spoil too much, but this movie does cover what made the events of the first movie happen. Now they explain what happened, but they don't explain why it happened to Tree, which again, that's fine. It's not really a big deal, because with what happened, it shouldn't have specifically been her. There's no reason it should have been specifically her. But it is, and that's just the way it is, and that's the way this movie is. It does get a little science-y at times. Now, I'm not anywhere near a scientist, so I don't know if the stuff that they're talking about makes sense science-wise or science theory-wise. But you know what? You just go with it. It's that kind of movie where that's their reason, and I'm just gonna go with it. If you enjoyed the first movie, you're probably gonna enjoy this one too. Now, it is a little different because, without saying too much, this one is kind of telling the same story, but in a different perspective. You see, the plot somewhat revolves around different dimensions, different realities, if you will. And the reason that the story is not the same as the first time around is because of this. We know who the killer was in the first one. Well, the baby mask killer is still in this world, but it's somebody different this time, and people are acting differently, and people that didn't know people before know them now, and just everything's different for Tree when she gets back to her repeated birthday. So when she thinks things are going on, she knows what's going on and she can solve it. Well, come to find out, things are different in this reality. So she has to figure out what's different, who's the killer, and there's hard choices she has to make within the movie in deciding certain things. And again, I'm trying to dance around spoilers here. Jessica Roth in this is just as good as she was in the first one. Again, she sells a lot of her character in this movie by her facial expressions and the way she acts, the way she handles scenes. But she not only does that this time around, especially in the scenes like you see in the trailer where she has to off herself a few times. They get a little silly with it. And that's definitely the tone of this movie. The first one was very aware on how silly it was, and this one is definitely aware of how silly it is. But she also gets a lot of scenes of really good character development, some serious scenes, and she does a really good job. I really am looking forward to seeing her in other things. Not saying she's too good for these movies. No, she's perfect for these movies, but I think she can handle some dramatic work, and I would really like to see that because of the way she's able to emote, not with just her words, but her body language and especially her facial expressions. The rest of the characters in this movie are pretty good. They're the same ones you knew from the first one. I mean, it's a lot of the characters, they're playing the same characters. Some of them are acting differently. Again, this whole alternate reality thing has other characters acting differently, but some have similar aspects. Like the roommate Ryan, I mean, he's basically the same character in both places. But then there's other characters that get to act differently, and like I said, the killer's not the same person in the first one, and that character's different, and that character has different situations, and just a lot of different things going on. So if you like the characters from the first one, you probably like them again in this one. Again, the humor, it's just like the first movie, but cranked up to 11. Again, the movie's very self-aware of itself. Some might think it's a little too silly. I had a good time watching it. Would this, again, this premise would not have worked in a real horror film. It's taking a horror element and making it silly. Plus, now it's adding in sci-fi, where there was jokes about Groundhog Day in the first one. There's jokes about things like Back to the Future in this one. And again, Tree does not watch very many movies. Let's just put it that way. When it comes to the babyface killer, while a factor in this movie, isn't as much of a factor in this one. I mean, again, you need the babyface killer in this, and it makes total sense, the story-wise and everything, but the story is more about the character of Tree and her motivations more than it is about the babyface killer. So some people might be a little disappointed by that. I think the movie probably could have used a little bit more with the babyface killer. Who the babyface killer ends up being, I thought was fine. I had a different theory that probably would have worked better for this movie, and eventually when we can talk spoilers, I will say that, but since this movie hasn't even come out yet, I don't want to really spoil anything. But what they did was good. I enjoyed it. Again, I had a heck of a good time with this movie. I enjoyed the first one because of how self-aware it was, and again, I enjoyed this one for the same reasons. Is it as good as the first one? I'm going to say no, but that's not knocking it. The first one just had the mystery about it, whereas in this one tries to answer the questions. And while that stuff's fine, it's not as strong as the mystery of the first one. I also will say there is a mid-credit scene. Is it great? The mid-credit scene, no. It's fine. It's enjoyable. But it feels like a lot of recent movies that say, well, this is where we go from here. Whether or not they make another sequel, they kind of left it open for one. I'm not sure if they're going to do one. Maybe they will. And the way they tease it, they would be mixing things up a little bit. Maybe. I don't know. I have a feeling this one's going to make a lot of money. But then again, whether or not people like it will determine if we get the next Happy Death Day movie. Now, granted, I don't know what they would call it, because Happy Death Day 3U doesn't make any sense. But maybe it's time they go into 3D. Happy Death Day 3D is probably where they're going to go with this. I don't know. But anyway, I had a good time with this movie. If you enjoyed the first one, you'll probably enjoy this one as well. But that's all I really got to say about this movie. I do recommend it. If you enjoyed the first one, go see this one in the theater. I think you'll enjoy it too. That's going to be all for this edition of Talkin Movies. If you like what you've heard here, please subscribe to the Real Geno YouTube channel, like this video, and if you have anything to say about this movie, if you got to see it at one of the college screenings like I stood outside for, I know I don't go to college, but yeah, I got it anyway. If you have anything to say about this movie, please feel free to leave a comment in the section below. Until next time, I'm your host, the Real Geno, Geno Reynolds. See you later.